The Catholic President of the United States declares war on backwards, pro-life, pro-God patriots. Pope Francis calls traditional Catholics sinners who are guilty of the crime of backwardism. And Bishop Robert Barron makes a pilgrimage to the childhood home of Bob Dylan. Hey, what's going on here? Whatever happened to the culture war? Why are all the Catholics on the wrong side of history? Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Michael Matt, and this is the Remnant Underground. Well, everyone is talking about it, right? We're going to get to it in some detail in a moment, but it has to be the most bizarre political speech in the history of this country.
Do not respect the Constitution. They're working right now, as I speak, in state after state to give power to decide elections in America to partisans and cronies.
My father fought in World War II. Like, it's just happening all over again in our own time. A crazy, maniacal dictator taking over. And I want to talk about that tonight because, well, it's getting increasingly embarrassing on the one hand that Joe Biden is a Catholic, and it's also getting increasingly illustrative, if I can use that word, in terms of what has gone wrong in the Catholic Church. This maniacal, lunatical tyrant gets to run around the world claiming to be the second Catholic now to ever occupy the Oval Office as President of the United States. I saw something on Facebook the other day that really reminded me, that drove it home, what has happened to the Catholic Church. I'm talking about Bishop Robert Barron. I know there's some people that like to rip on Bishop Barron all the time. I don't know that much about him. I would certainly say he's not the worst bishop, right? I think he still has the faith on some level. So I'm not trying to just beat up on Bishop Barron, but I want to use him precisely because he's not the radical, most goofy, tie-dye, hippie, nutjob bishop in the country, right? He is more conservative on a lot of levels. But there's Bishop Barron out there on Facebook advertising the fact that he has made a pilgrimage to the home of one Robert Zimmerman, what most of us know as Bob Dylan. We'll put that up on the screen. And I'm not saying he's playing the part of Satan or the devil, but look at what he posts on Facebook about Bob Dylan. He says, "Friends, the bishops of Minnesota and the Dakotas had our provincial meetings in Duluth last week, and we took an afternoon jaunt to see Hibbing, Minnesota, where I had the opportunity to visit Bob Dylan's childhood home and high school. As many of you know, Bob Dylan is a hero of mine. I fell in love with his music when I was 13, and I think he is best read as a spiritual poet." What is it, Walter? It's good stuff, don't you think? Nice. Yeah, I actually do not mean to make fun of him. This is just astounding to think about. A spiritual poet. And I think when you start looking at some of this, you begin to realize why we're talking past each other. That's how Bob Barron grew up, listening to Dylan. You see, this is where we've come as a society, and I wonder what Bishop Barron thinks of this rather astonishing admission on the part of Bob Dylan on 60 Minutes a few years back. Check this out.
Why do you still do it? Why are you still out here?
Well, the destiny thing. I mean, I made a bargain with it, a long time ago, and I'm holding up my end.
What was your bargain?
To get where I am now.
Should I ask who you made the bargain with?
With the with the chief commander.
On this earth?
And on this earth, and then in a world we can't see.
Now, what's he talking about there? You can see it's written all over the 60 Minute guy's face. Holy cow. This is like the conspiracy theory stuff about guys like Jim Morrison and Mick Jagger and those guys like selling their souls to the devil, right? Is that what he just said? Or is he talking about something else? If he's talking about Jesus, because I'm sure Barron will say, well, he became a Christian. If you're talking about Jesus, Excellency, you know very darn well you always give full credit to Jesus by name. You don't hem and haw like Bob was doing there. So what's he talking about?
with the chief commander.
So what happened, Fred? I want to talk just a minute about the culture war. I know nobody does anymore. Again, that's special, the church lady kind of talk. You're not supposed to do that. It's not cool. It's not savvy. It's not sophisticated. But I want to talk about that. Because at the same time that Bishop Barron was enjoying the music of Bob Dylan, you had the Stones, the Rolling Stones, out on stage. And you know, I just think culturally and from a point of view of how did we get to where we are now, it's interesting to look back a little bit.
Just as every cop is a criminal, and all the sinners saints, as if this day as you call Lucifer, 'cause I'm in need of some restraint.
Now, this psychiatrist analyzes the way in which the diabolic works. First, love of nudity.
But it was music. It was in the airways. It was everywhere. It was in the farm fields. It was in every corner of the earth, right? It had a huge, huge impact. But I remember growing up in a Catholic home, we weren't allowed to come anywhere near this stuff because my father, you know, who was a conscientious head of a Catholic family, a Catholic father, like all the other dads in the neighborhood, they saw this stuff as absolutely anti-Catholic. If you don't, you have to ask yourself, were all those people who were relatively sane in the, you know, the 50s and 60s, those dads and moms, were they just a bunch of paranoid nutters, right? Sort of, you know, people who are afraid of their own shadows? Is that what they were? Or were they right? And if we lost the ability to see evil as they did, we've gotten used to it 50, 60, 70 years later. You gotta admit that's a fair question to ask. My father was talking about it all the time. And he believed it was permeated with sex, sexual temptation. It was like an occasion of sin at the very least. He also wrote articles and gave talks saying that the new music was permeated with Marxism. And so today we say, holy cow, what was wrong with these? Really? Were they paranoid? Do you remember where John Lennon ended up? What he ended up singing about? Imagine there's no heaven, there's no hell, there's no religion, there's no borders, there's no countries. Exactly what is happening in our country and all throughout Europe right now. You say the guys that recognized this early on were paranoid, the Catholic people who were concerned about this invasion, cultural invasion. You know, back to this Bishop Barron comment. It's just, again, he doesn't know any better, so I'm not rebuking him. I'm just, it's an astonishing indicator of what happened to the Catholic Church. How we're talking past each other now, you know. Because the ultimate Marxist minstrel, if you will, was Bob Dylan. And he also did things like paying tribute to the Black Panthers and their leader George Jackson, who was killed by guards at San Quentin prison during an attempted escape back on August 21st, 1971. And Dylan writes a song about this. He says, I woke up this morning, there were tears in my bed. They killed a man I really loved. They shot him through the head. Lord, Lord, they cut George Jackson down, says Dylan, sang Bob Dylan, about the man who famously advocated selective retaliatory violence and who had famously said, I met Marx, Lenin, Trotsky, Engels, and Mao when I entered prison, and they redeemed me. These guys were not idiots. They were well-read. They knew what was going on. John Lennon was a well-read guy. Bob Dylan knew what was going on. A lot of them did. They weren't morons. They weren't Lady Gaga, right? They knew what they were talking about. And here's Bob Dylan singing tributes to this guy, this anarchist from the Black Panthers. So of course parents at the time, in those years, pastors, rabbis, teachers, of course they saw these cultural icons, these singers, these entertainers as a subcultural threat to their children. We got used to what our parents and grandparents saw as the face of evil. We got used to it. I know how this sounds. I get it. It's lampoonable. I get it. But that's what happened. We became Alexander Pope's monster of so frightful a mien, right? As to be hated needs but to be seen, remember? Yet seen too often, familiar with her face, we first endure, then pity, then embrace. And that, friends, is exactly what happened. Yesterday, in this society, the Catholic bishops, as I say, were out there warning against the cultural revolution of the 1960s, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Today, well, they're on YouTube celebrating Bob Dylan's birthday.
Hey everybody, it's Bishop Barron. I'm here in my home in Santa Barbara, and I'm marking a very special day, which is the 80th birthday of Bob Dylan. And I discovered Bob Dylan the same year I discovered Thomas Aquinas. I was 14. And I was listening to the Concert for Bangladesh. And George Harrison of the Beatles introduced Bob Dylan, whom I'd never heard of. And he begins singing one of his great songs from the early days, A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall. And I had never heard popular music with that sort of level of sophistication and poetry in the lyrics. And so Bob Dylan had me from that moment on. And this now Nobel Prize-winning poet has indeed shaped the way I think about a lot of things. Forgotten face, I hear the ancient footsteps like the Happy 80th birthday, Bob Dylan.
So, and the question that immediately comes up, who was right? The bishops who were looking at Bob Dylan back in the 60s and going, oh my gosh, parents, everybody be careful, this is anarchy, this is a cultural revolution. Those bishops? Or today's bishops?
Gone from rags to riches in the sorrow of the night.
I mean, there's no doubt in anyone's mind that Bob Dylan was a cultural revolutionary, so I guess what we're saying is Bishop Barron has no problem with the revolution that Bob was singing about? Really?
Oh.
What do you think about cutting?
Oh, you better how far we out of time?
2 minutes. You want to head on the way back?
Yeah, no, hurry.
Dylan was openly out there mocking things like, people like my father worried about communism. He was mocking them. I mean, he had song after song where he was just calling them idiots and children looking for communists under the bed. They were nuts.
Communism is the scavenger of decaying civilization. It makes its way into a country and into a culture only when that culture begins to rot.
He even singled out, Bob Dylan did, he singled out the John Birch Society by name for being too concerned about communism.
Well, I was feeling low down and blue. I didn't know what in the world I was gonna do. Them communists, they were coming around. They were in the air. They were all over the ground. They wouldn't give me no peace. Well, I run down most hurriedly and joined the John Birch Society. Got me a secret membership card, started walking off down the road. Oh boy, I'm a real John Bircher now.
He's making fun of the John Birch Society, and in a witty way. Nobody's doubting his ability as a wordsmith and as a poet. Yeah, he's making fun of him very effectively. But it helps. Yeah, right. It helps you to understand why the original traditional Catholics and the Protestant ministers, there were rabbis out, lots of people were very upset about what was happening culturally, and they regarded these guys as Marxist minstrels for a reason. Because they were using the new music to obliterate Christian society, Christian sensibilities, Christian mores, Christian morality, and they admitted it. That was the whole point of it. They were taking it down with sex and drugs and Hare Krishna and Black Panthers and pot and free love and anarchy and Marxism and whatever else, right? This isn't like a traditional Catholic position. You watch a documentary on CNN about that period, they're going to admit that's what they were all doing. And Dylan was, like I say, he was their cultural icon. And there was a war going on, friends. A war against Jesus Christ. A war against the single most powerful Christian moral authority, moral voice in society, even at that time, the Catholic Church. And the new music was being used as a battering ram against Christian morality, against Christ, against the Christian family, against everything. And it's a chief order of business, as Archbishop Sheen spoke about, this idea of division, dividing everything, which in and of itself is, says Sheen, of the demonic, is a sign of the demonic.
Anything, therefore, that breaks pattern, that destroys unity, that corrupts Gestalt, produces discord. That is the diabolic.
So this music now divided society from its Christian roots. It started sexual revolution. It drove a wedge between children and their parents. Bob Dylan was singing songs about that too.
Mothers and fathers throughout the land, and don't criticize what you can't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging.
So nobody talks about it anymore. It's like it never happened. You know? I happen to be old enough to have grown up surrounded by it. And it was a huge thing. As traditional Catholics, they were nearly just as concerned as the cultural revolution of sex, drugs, and rock and roll as they were about the liturgical revolution in the Catholic Church. It was one and the same. They didn't see a huge difference. It was anarchy, liturgical anarchy, and cultural anarchy happening at the same time. And the big debate was which one came first. At the Remnant, my father argued that the liturgical anarchy came first in the sense that there was anarchy going all the way back to the turn of the century in the Catholic Church, warned against by guys like Pope Pius X, right? Back a long time before the revolutions really came out in the open. But nobody talks about these things anymore. And maybe we should. Even if we're going to get mocked as the church lady, maybe we should. There's abortion, gay marriage, transgenderism, all these things. How do you think that they got here? How do you think we got saddled by this? If not through the subtle approach of a cultural revolution that brought them in. And I get it. Today, anything goes. You know, Dylan compared to Lady Gaga, he's Shirley Temple. I get that. But that's not the point. The point is not how wretched things are and overtly demonic things are now. The point is to look at how it got started when they had to be a little bit more clever to knock down Christian society, Christian mores, Christian morality 50, 60 years ago. You see? So today, of course, it makes perfect sense. You know, the devil, his greatest genius was to make men think he doesn't exist, right? Is that a problem? So today, only prudes and Quakers and scrupulous types worry about the satanic influences in music and movies, right? But look around you. Look at the results. Look what's happened in movies. What's happened in music. Look what's happening to kids. Look at the parents that are bringing their little children now. They grew up with this rot. They're bringing their kids into libraries to have drag queens read them stories because they grew up with this stuff. They don't know what evil looks like. You do. Look at the evil all around you. How do you think it got here? Look at the evil internationally, countries all over the world. Do you remember when Ireland, for example, was a Catholic country? Everybody thought Ireland, they thought Catholic, right? 1950s, Ireland is pumping Catholic priests, vocations all over the world, right? 10 years later, what happens? 20 years later, 30 years later, all throughout the 1980s, I remember bands, rock bands like U2, underground bands running around Dublin and everywhere else, New York City, Sydney, everywhere, campaigning as Irish guys for gay marriage in the name of love. You know? A couple of years ago in Catholic Ireland, what did we see? We see the Catholic Irish people vote in a married homosexual prime minister in Catholic Ireland. They legalized abortion in Ireland. They made gay marriage the law of the land in Catholic Ireland. And today, this is happening. If you've kept your Catholic faith, if you've kept your Christian identity in formerly Catholic Ireland, you're going to jail.
Enoch Burke was taken from the High Court this evening to Mountjoy Prison. He was jailed for breaching an injunction granted last week and for refusing to give any undertaking that he would stop breaching it. The disciplinary process began after he confronted the principal at a school event in June. At the end of a church service, he voiced his opposition to an earlier request by the principal to call a student who wants to transition by a new name and to use the they pronoun. He told the High Court he didn't want to go to prison, but he said a teacher could only be suspended for an allegation of gross misconduct. He said his religious beliefs were not misconduct. He said bowing to something he knew to be manifestly wrong would be a shame and disgrace and a terrible example to students, and he said it would violate his conscience.
This is the kind of demonic insanity that comes when a civilization, a society, turns against God. God and his law, the foundation of all law and order, you see? Before, when we acknowledged God and tried to live by his rules, even as late as the 1950s and 60s, God protected. He afforded us a certain degree of protection for our society, didn't he? When my parents never locked the keys took the keys out of their ignition. They never locked the door of the house. Even in the late 70s, early 80s, I'm wandering around the neighborhood like Stand By Me, gone all day long in the summer. There was no kids getting killed and raped out in the streets, right? There was a certain protection that following God's law and being at least nominally Christian, there's a certain protection that we all knew and appreciated and took for granted. You know, God is gone now. We told him to get the hell out of here. We banished him. We canceled him. And now there are very few people who feel free or safe anywhere in the world. Instead, people are becoming afraid to leave their homes.
CCTV footage shows the teen dragging the mom along the concrete footpath by her hair as she clings onto her stroller. The stroller falls to the ground as the desperate mother clings onto it, with her 2 children screaming. She suffered minor cuts and bruises but fell on her stomach, with officers concerned for her unborn child.
This is hard to look at. A mother with little babies walking in the street in broad daylight, getting assaulted by a teenager, dragged around by her hair. Do you see what society looks like? Do you see the godless chaos that comes out when you kick Christ out, friends? This is the thing that we face.
Hey girls, it's Miss Fletcher. So before we go, I wanted to remind you of something that we do at St. Mary's that's so special and that I miss a lot. So I want to see if you can join in with me. We're going to sing This Little Light of Mine. Okay? Ready? This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
I know many of you aren't Catholic. I don't want to come out here and talk about Francis, but the reality is the shepherd, the biggest, the leader, the adult in the room, the spiritual moral authority he's supposed to be, has gone AWOL. He's gone nuts, right? When he's seeing that, when we see that, we want to fall down on our knees and pray and beg God to intercede on behalf of our society. When Francis sees that, he writes an encyclical on climate change. Francis is a hippie pope who's trying to finish the revolution of the 1960s. In order to do that, he has to bury the Catholic Church. In order to do that, he has to crush the resurgence. We are the resurgence, the traditional Catholics who saw through that revolution. He's canceling rightful worship of Almighty God right now while he's tolerating this sort of thing. Catholic parish of St. Martin of Ilno, Efferketen, Switzerland. I'm sure I'm butchering that name. Here we see women pretending to be priests. They're speaking the words of consecration, consecrating the bread and wine at the altar. This is an absolute violation of the canon law, of canon 907 to be specific here. Take a little look at that. Now remember, as you watch this, he's approving this abomination while he's crushing the traditional Latin Mass. That's just happened with the Institute of Christ the King, for example, in Chicago. They were completely shut down, as is happening to many of the masses out in Arlington, Virginia right now. This isn't something hypothetical in the future. He's canceling those masses, and he's letting these ones fly. Nice pride stole there, Father. You know? And again, this is going on all over the world, especially in Europe. And the Vatican is chiefly concerned with climate change. And the Vatican is shutting down Latin masses worldwide. We come out here every week trying to raise awareness of what's happening because it affects every man, woman, and child on the face of this earth. That is, that there's an evil spirit has infiltrated the Church of Jesus Christ, has infiltrated the Catholic Church. I'm not going to leave the church. Where I give you an example. People say, you should join the Orthodox. And I say, well, my Orthodox friends tell me that their church has already approved divorce, has already approved contraception, the things that we're terrified Francis is going to do in the future in the Catholic Church. So I don't see the Orthodox as an option if I ever in a million years ever would have thought of leaving my church. In other words, religion itself is under fire. We're not looking for some escape hatch. We're trying to raise awareness to the attack going on against Christ and his church all throughout the world. There is no bomb shelter for this. There is no place where you can hide out and everything's just fine. You got to stand up and confront it. And that's what we try to do here. Encourage people to stand up and confront it. Because today, apostate Catholics are running all over the place. They are running the world in a sense. The most powerful political positions in the world. And here's one of them.
MAGA forces are determined to take this country backwards to an America where there is no right to choose, no right to privacy, no right to contraception, no right to marry who you love.
So there's your Catholic president. There's your fruit of Vatican II, telling the world that patriotic, God-fearing, family-oriented, pro-life defenders of the unborn are the biggest threat to our nation right now. Catholic. And 2 days after that talk, Joe the Catholic Biden did it again. He doubled down. Labor Day, Milwaukee, he says the extreme MAGA Republicans have chosen to go backwards, full of anger, violence, hate, and division. There you go again. Doesn't that sound like Francis? Backwards?
Sono tradizionali, sono indietristi, vanno indietro senza radici. L'indietrismo è un peccato perché non va avanti con la Chiesa.
They're on the same team, friends. These two Catholic guys. Again, Biden declaring war on patriotic Americans. Pope Francis declaring war on traditional Catholics. Blessing and approving everything this diabolical idiot Biden and his friends in Davos are doing right now. In Philadelphia, when you're commander-in-chief, when you're president, when he stood before you like nothing anything anyone's ever seen before, he wasn't declaring war on political opponents, was he? He was declaring war on voters. He was declaring war on you. How long before you're going to start getting knocks on the door from the Gestapo trying to make sure you're not posing an even bigger threat to this country? They're already doing it, right? Dehumanize your opponents. That's what Team Davos is doing, and Joe Biden is at the top of that roster. Make your opponents no longer deserving of the protections of law because they're too much of a threat. That's what they're setting up for, friends. Make your opponents, make us, make 75 million American patriots, God-loving Americans, make them subhuman. Have we not seen this before? Isn't that exactly what Joseph Stalin did when they expelled God from their country? Isn't that what the communist Mao did? Isn't that what the sicko Adolf Hitler did? Of course. In fact, you have people out there right now who are Holocaust survivors, and they're attesting to this. They're giving witness, like, we've seen this before.
In May 2022, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Klaus Schwab, the architect of the dystopian Great Reset, declared, and I quote him, "Let's be clear, the future is not just happening, the future is built by us, a powerful community here in this room. We have the means to impose the state of the world." Harari declares that there are too many useless people. Remember, the Nazi term was worthless eaters. This is the new eugenics. It is embraced by the most powerful global billionaire technocrats who gather in Davos. Big tech, Big Pharma, the financial oligarchs, academics, government leaders, and the military-industrial complex. These megalomaniacs have paved the road to another Holocaust.
It's happening all over again. And Joe, the Catholic Biden, and Pope Francis, the Catholic Pope, are all in on that World Economic Forum globalist agenda that she's talking about. Nancy Pelosi is a Catholic. Melinda Gates is a Catholic. Tony Fauci is a Catholic. Justin Trudeau, the little ferret, is a Catholic. Gavin Newsom is a Catholic. AOC is a Catholic. Antonio Guterres is a Catholic. Joe Biden is a Catholic. John Kerry is a Catholic. Jorge Mario Bergoglio is a Catholic. Behold the fruits, friends, of Vatican II. Traditional Catholicism is the only way out of here. It is the only way back to sanity. It is not about liturgical preference. It's about the salvation of our country and of our church and of our souls and of our children. It's the only way back to Almighty God. And that, friends, is the purpose of this show every week. I felt it was necessary to come out and explain once again what we're trying to do here. And that's what we're trying to do, to point the way back to God, to return to tradition, to become backwardists for God's sake and for the sake of our children, to become those backwardists, yes, guilty as charged, to form a worldwide army of Catholics who stand up now, who unite, those clans of Catholics who unite with the real Catholics, who suddenly realize something went really wrong, that there was a coup, a demonic coup in the Catholic Church, the human element of the Catholic Church, and they're standing up right now to reclaim their church. Get in behind them. I'm talking about real Catholics like Archbishop Vigano, real Catholics like Bishop Schneider, real Catholics like Cardinal Raymond Burke, even people culturally on the internet, guys like Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, they're waking up, right? Many of these guys are going to the Latin Mass. Even some on Fox News, I got some hope for. A woman like Laura Ingraham, right? Proud Catholic. They know something's wrong. They know something's terribly wrong in the Vatican, right? And all of the other Catholics who are smelling the sulfur. Even, it looks like, Governor DeSantis.
He is the American Nero. Think about it. They've been willing to mobilize the administrative apparatus of government to go after people they don't like. Remember, this time last year, they were imposing vax mandates. They wanted people to lose their job based on getting an mRNA shot or not. And unfortunately, I think the weaponization of this government is something, when you talk about 87,000 IRS agents, who's that going to go after? It's going to go after the people that he was attacking in his speech last night.
Absolutely right, Governor. God bless you for saying it. Joe Biden, as we all know, is the loyal son of the Church of Accompaniment. He's the loyal son of the Church of Vatican II, which means be whatever the hell you want. In fact, don't ever claim not to be a Catholic. Don't ever claim to be an apostate. Let the whole world know that you're a Catholic and you get to be pro-gay marriage, pro-abortion, whatever you want, because that's what Catholics do. You know, and as such, these guys posing as Catholics pose a threat to our country. They are an embarrassment to us all, an embarrassment to authentic Catholics and Catholicism, and of course, they are an affront to Almighty God. So Biden and Nancy Pelosi and John Kerry and Pope Francis, they're in league with the dark side. And if we don't understand that, then we are going to lose the faith as well, because we're going to be sucked into this demonic anti-Christian vortex. Exactly, by the way, as Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre predicted. He reminded us, he warned us in his open letter to confused Catholics. He said, we are all on the brink of losing the faith if we don't get this right, and if we don't understand that this is a spiritual war. And we cannot let that happen. Stay awake. Keep your eyes open. Understand. Don't bury your head in the sand just because you're worried about scandal. Archbishop Lefebvre says you need to take advantage of the spiritual weapons. Pray, as Our Lady said. Do penance. Say the rosary. Together in the family, he said. He pleaded, and he was right. So let's wake up. Let's keep the authentic faith, and let's fight back against devils posing as angels and demons now posing as Catholics. Friends, it is the only way. I'm Michael Matt for Remnant TV. Thank you so much for listening. God bless you all, and we'll see you next week.